The grand ballroom of the New York Hilton sparkled under the glow of dazzling chandeliers. It was the kind of night where the wealthy and influential gathered, their laughter mingling with the clink of champagne glasses and the soft hum of a live orchestra. The event was no ordinary gala. It was a high-profile fundraiser for children's education, organized by some of the most prominent philanthropists in the country. Reporters from all major networks swarmed the scene, their cameras capturing every smile, handshake, and whispered conversation. At the center of it all stood Melania Trump, dressed in an elegant pale blue gown that flowed like water. She seemed to glide effortlessly through the crowd. Her presence commanded attention, not just because of her fame, but because of the quiet confidence she exuded. Tonight, she was more than the former First Lady. She was a woman on a mission, championing a cause that had always been close to her heart. For the past year, Melania had been tirelessly working on her initiative, a program dedicated to addressing the mental health challenges faced by children in an increasingly digital and demanding world. The project had already garnered significant attention, both positive and critical, but Melania remained undeterred. She believed in her work and in the children it aimed to help. As she moved from one conversation to the next, engaging with donors and educators, she kept her focus sharp. The evening's goal was clear: raise awareness, secure funding, and inspire action. And yet, she was fully aware of the scrutiny she faced. In the eyes of the media, her every move was dissected, her every word analyzed. She knew tonight would be no different. At the back of the room, a group of reporters huddled near the press area, their eyes fixed on her. Among them was Mark Sullivan, a journalist known for his provocative questions and no-holds-barred approach. Tall, with sharp features and a perpetual smirk, Mark had built his career on creating viral moments, often at the expense of his subjects. He wasn't here to report on the fundraiser success. He was here to find a headline, and he had his sights set on Melania. "She looks untouchable, doesn't she?" Mark muttered to a fellow reporter, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let's see how long that lasts." The program began, and the room quieted as the host took the stage to introduce the evening's agenda. Speeches from various supporters of the cause filled the air, each one met with polite applause. But the real highlight of the evening was yet to come. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host finally announced, "please welcome our keynote speaker, a woman who has dedicated herself to the well-being of children across the world, Melania Trump." The audience erupted in applause as Melania gracefully ascended the stage. She stood at the podium, her hands lightly resting on its edges, and surveyed the crowd. The lights cast a warm glow on her face, and for a moment, there was a sense of calm in the room. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and composed. "Thank you all for being here tonight and for supporting a cause that is so important to me and to countless children around the world. Education is not just about academics. It is about giving children the tools they need to navigate life with confidence and resilience." Her speech was heartfelt, weaving personal anecdotes with broader reflections on the challenges children face today. She spoke of the importance of kindness, empathy, and the role adults play in shaping a better future. The audience listened intently, their expressions a mix of admiration and genuine interest. But as Melania spoke, Mark Sullivan was busy taking notes, his mind racing with questions designed to put her on the spot. He had done his homework, digging into her past statements and controversies surrounding her husband's presidency. He knew that if he played his cards right, he could create a viral moment that would dominate headlines. When Melania concluded her speech, the room erupted into applause once more. She smiled graciously and took her seat, but the night was far from over. The Q&A session was about to begin, and this was Mark's chance. The host returned to the stage, inviting the audience to ask questions. A few hands went up, and the initial questions were polite and predictable, focusing on the details of her initiative and her vision for the future. Melania answered each one with poise, her passion for the cause shining through. Then Mark raised his hand. The host hesitated for a brief moment, recognizing him and perhaps sensing the potential for trouble. But he couldn't deny a journalist the opportunity to ask a question. Mr. Sullivan from New York Times, the host said, nodding toward him. Mark stood, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Mrs. Trump, he began, his tone sharp and deliberate, your initiative focuses on promoting kindness and addressing the mental health challenges children face. But how do you reconcile that message with the rhetoric we've seen from your husband, the former president, over the years? Many would argue that his statements and actions have contributed to the very issues you claim to stand against. The room fell silent. All eyes were on Melania as the weight of the question hung in the air. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances, while others leaned forward, eager to see how she would respond. Melania's expression didn't falter. She looked directly at Mark, her calm demeanor unwavering. For a moment, the silence stretched, and then she spoke. "Thank you for your question," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You have the right to your opinion, as does everyone in this room. But let me be clear. This initiative is not about politics. It is about children. It is about giving them the tools they need to thrive, regardless of the challenges they face. If we focus only on the negativity of the past, we lose sight of the future we can build." Mark wasn't satisfied. "But surely you understand how people might see this as hypocritical. Can you really separate yourself from your husband's legacy?" The tension in the room grew thicker, but Melania remained composed. "I am not here to debate politics or defend anyone's actions," she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "I am here to speak for children who cannot speak for themselves. If you wish to focus on division, that is your choice. But I choose to focus on unity and solutions." Her words hung in the air, a quiet power radiating from her. The room was silent, save for the faint clicking of cameras capturing the moment. Mark opened his mouth as if to respond, but quickly realized he had no ground to stand on. Melania's calm yet decisive response had left him, and the room speechless. Mark Sullivan sat down, momentarily disarmed by Melania's poised response. The room was still, as if no one dared to break the tension hanging in the air. Even the cameras seemed to pause, capturing the power of the moment. Guests exchanged glances, some quietly nodding in approval of Melania's unwavering composure. But Mark wasn't finished. As the host moved on to the next question, he leaned over to a fellow reporter, whispering, "She's good at dodging, but I'll get her before the night is over." Meanwhile, the next few questions focused on Melania's initiative. A teacher from a low-income school stood up to thank her for highlighting the importance of mental health and asked about practical steps schools could take to help children. Melania answered thoughtfully, offering insights from her own experiences and emphasizing the need for collaboration between parents, teachers, and policymakers. The room began to relax, the earlier tension dissipating as the focus shifted back to the cause. But just as the session was about to conclude, Mark raised his hand again. The host hesitated, glancing at Melania, who gave a subtle nod to proceed. "Mrs. Trump," Mark began, his tone more forceful this time, "you talk about promoting kindness and unity. But don't you think it's fair to acknowledge that your family's actions have often been divisive? Isn't it hypocritical to stand here and preach about unity when so many people view your husband's presidency as a period of deep polarization?" A murmur rippled through the audience. The question was sharper than before, cutting straight to the heart of the criticism often levied against her. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned in, eager to see how she would respond. Melania's expression remained serene, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, an unspoken strength, a readiness to confront the question head-on. She took a moment before responding, her voice calm but resolute. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, addressing him directly, "I understand your perspective. It is easy to focus on division, to assign blame, and to criticize from a distance. But I ask you this. What are you doing to bring people together? What are you doing to make the world a kinder place?" Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Mark was silent. The audience turned to him, waiting for a response, but he had none. Melania continued, her voice gaining strength. "I am not here to rewrite history or to argue about the past. I am here to focus on the future, on the children who need our help, on the families who struggle every day, and on the small acts of kindness that can make a difference. If we continue to dwell on what divides us, we will never move forward. My work is about hope, not hate. The room erupted into applause, breaking the tension that had built with each word she spoke. Even those who had been skeptical of her motives found themselves nodding in agreement. Melania had managed to shift the narrative, steering it away from controversy and back to the cause she was championing. Mark, however, wasn't ready to back down completely. As the applause died down, he leaned into his microphone, his tone more measured this time. "Mrs. Trump, you make a compelling argument, but don't you think the public deserves accountability? Isn't that part of leadership?" Melania tilted her head slightly, considering his question. When she spoke, her voice was softer but no less impactful. "Accountability is important, Mr. Sullivan, but accountability is not about tearing others down. It is about taking responsibility for your actions and using your position to make a positive impact. That is what I am doing tonight, and that is what I will continue to do." Her words were met with a second wave of applause, louder and more sustained than before. Mark sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable, as Melania turned her attention back to the rest of the audience. "Before we conclude," she said, her voice carrying a note of finality, "I want to leave you with this thought. We live in a world where it is far too easy to criticize, to judge, and to divide. But it takes courage to choose kindness, to build bridges instead of walls, and to focus on what unites us. I hope tonight inspires you to be that courage for someone else." The audience rose to their feet, giving her a standing ovation. The sound filled the ballroom, drowning out any lingering doubts or criticisms. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as Melania stepped away from the podium, her head held high. Backstage, as the applause continued, Melania was greeted by members of her team. "You handled that beautifully," one of them said, handing her a glass of water. Melania smiled faintly, her mind still on the exchange with Mark. She knew there would be headlines dissecting every word she had said, but she also knew she had stayed true to her purpose. Meanwhile, in the ballroom, Mark sat at his table, scrolling through his phone. Tweets were already flooding in about the event, with most praising Melania's composure and her powerful responses. He frowned, realizing that instead of creating a controversy, he had inadvertently given her a platform to shine. Later that night, as Melania's car pulled away from the venue, she looked out at the city lights, reflecting on the evening. The questions had been tough, but they had also been an opportunity, a chance to show the world who she truly was and what she stood for. And in her heart, she knew that the real victory wasn't in silencing her critics, but in inspiring others to rise above the noise and focus on what truly mattered. The aftermath of the event was nothing short of extraordinary. By the next morning, clips of Melania's calm and resolute responses had gone viral. Social media was abuzz with praise for her poised handling of Mark Sullivan's pointed questions. The hashtag kindness over division trended globally, as people across political lines acknowledged the power of her words. Even major news outlets, many of which were often critical of her, published articles highlighting her grace and the sharp focus of her message. Headlines read, "Melania Trump's message of unity strikes a chord and a powerful reminder that kindness isn't weakness." The ballroom confrontation became a symbol of rising above criticism and choosing positivity. Mark Sullivan, however, found himself in the midst of mixed reactions. While some praised him for asking tough questions, many accused him of trying to provoke unnecessary controversy. A prominent columnist even wrote, "Last night, Mark Sullivan sought to diminish a cause, but Melania Trump reminded us all why it matters." The backlash forced him to issue a statement, but it was clear that the moment belonged to Melania. Amid all the attention, Melania kept a low profile. She spent the next few days visiting schools and meeting with organizations that supported her initiative. For her, The true success wasn't in the headlines, but in the quiet changes she hoped to inspire in the lives of children and their families. One of the schools she visited had implemented a new mental health program, thanks to funds raised at the gala. Seeing the smiles of children benefiting from these efforts brought her more satisfaction than any viral moment ever could. But the highlight of the week came in the form of a letter. It arrived at her office, handwritten and simple, but its contents were profound. It was from a young girl named Lucy, a seventh grader who had struggled with bullying at school. The letter read, "Dear Mrs. Trump, I saw your speech, and it made me feel like I'm not alone. Sometimes I feel like no one sees me, but when you talked about kindness and standing up for others, it gave me hope. Thank you for reminding me that I matter." Melania held the letter in her hands, her heart full. This was why she did what she did, not for the recognition or the headlines, but for moments like these, where even one person could feel seen, heard, and valued. As she folded the letter and placed it in her desk drawer, she thought back to the gala, to Mark's questions, and to her own journey. The world would always be full of noise, criticism, and division, but her mission was clear. Kindness wasn't about silencing critics. It was about amplifying hope. And as long as she had the platform to do so, she would continue to use it. Stepping out of her office that evening, Melania looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, casting the city in a golden glow. She smiled to herself, thinking of Lucy and all the children who might find strength in her message. The world wasn't perfect, but with small acts of kindness, it could become a little brighter.